Welcome, friends, to another edition of the SIP series on the Stir, brought to you by Gazelle Media. I'm your host, Trish Muyco-Tobin. I have to say, this show is something else, and if you find yourself just a little jumpy or have nightmares as a result of viewing some of the movies from today's must-see list, please direct all your complaints to my guest co-host, my binge bestie, author and entertainment guru, Debbie Baldwin. Hello, Debbie.
Calls and letters, care of Gazelle magazine. Hi, thanks for having me back.
Oh, well, our pleasure. Thank you for providing some early morning scares for me. You know, Deb, you and I do some light research and sometimes the occasional deep dive when preparing for the show. So today we are taking a closer look at Debbie Baldwin's top straight up horror films. These are the scariest movies, and oh my goodness, Debbie, I'm not gonna argue with you.
Well, the list is subjective. There are a lot to choose from. But you can say, if the 80s was the decade of comedy, great comedy, the 70s was the decade of great horror. And I think I was remiss in that there are no zombie movies on the list, and there, are many fantastic ones, but I had to stick with kind of what scares me. So the list is very subjective. I rewatched them all.
Oh,
and
Deb.
So, the good news is I'm totally in the Halloween spirit, and the bad news is I'm afraid to leave my house.
See, we were talking before the show, and I'm listening to you with disbelief as you told me that you saw these movies all by yourself. And I'm sitting here shaking in my boots because, I was a bit on edge prepping for this show, Deb. I normally have this routine that I get up at the crack of dawn on the day that we tape the show. And, before the sun is up, the doggies are still asleep, so they're not bothering me. Not this time. I mean, I had to wait till daylight. Just the mere mention of some of these movies really takes me back.
And they're scary when, I'm like queuing up a movie and thinking, oh God, do I really want to sit through this again? They're hard to endure. You got to really be in the mood and have a friend or a group of friends and the popcorn popped and, get excited for some good scares. And, those kinds of scares are different. I'm not a huge fan of those movies that kind of creep inside your head and keep you up at night. I like, a good face in the mirror behind you on a scary movie. But there are some of both on the list.
Yes.
And, because they're all scary.
And I like scary movies, not that I enjoy watching them because I'm really, really scared of them, but the movies that are legitimate scary movies to me are movies that, if you thought about it, can happen in real life. In fact, a couple of these movies are based on real life events, as we will come to find out.
And one that we'll talk about that, I think is on everybody's list, and it's a fairly recent movie, but it really hit a home run in the horror department.
Right, exactly. So you'll find that as we go along this list of these now classic movies, you'll find that some of these movies, some of the later ones, actually drew some inspiration from their iconic predecessors. So for those of you who are fans of the genre, or perhaps seeing some of them, rewatching some of them with fresh eyes, you'll start seeing that you'll see some of that when it comes to the characters, the plot lines, sometimes even, a special effect or two, even the score. So we're going to start in 1968, Deb. We're going to do this chronologically.
Okay.
We're going to start with a Roman Polanski film starring Mia Farrow. And also this was the feature film debut of one Charles Grodin. Yes, and we are talking about Rosemary's Baby.
And what a way for Charles Grodin to kick off his career as a fairly lighthearted.
Right. Oh my gosh.
Rosemary's Baby, as you said, was a Roman Polanski film. And I know, Trish, you've noticed that his films he's directed have ended up landing on a lot of these lists. I mean, his personal life aside,
Yes.
his skills as a director are unparalleled. This movie stars a young Mia Farrow, and she's a newlywed, and she moves into this apartment building in New York that has a terrible history of suspicious activity. People think it's the apartment building's haunted, and immediately she gets a weird vibe from the neighbors, and the husband's kind of brushing her off. Mia Farrow and her husband, the characters, decide that they are going to have a baby, and on what they are calling baby night, which should trigger warning bells in every audience membership.
No kidding. No
The
kidding.
neighbor brings over a special dessert to, I don't know, get them in the mood for baby night. And
Are there just being nice neighbors, Deb?
she tastes some of this dessert. It tastes weird. She doesn't eat it. She passes out. She has this kind of half awake fantasy of being raped by a demon with all of the neighbors looking on naked. And she wakes up and she has scratches all over her body. I think everyone can pretty much put two and two together for the rest of the plot. She's
Yes.
having a baby. The neighbors have sent her to a special gynecologist or obstetrician to oversee the pregnancy. The acting is great. You know, one thing that's great about these older horror movies is they almost all of them have established actors in the roles, as opposed to modern horror movies, which studios tend to make them now because they're incredibly inexpensive. So if you can make, you know, a Paranormal Activity for $300,000 and it grosses $50 million at the box office, bring it on, you know? You know, these movies were more considered in the mainstream realm.
Correct.
And so you get these great performances on top of this eerie plot. So yeah, Rosemary's Baby.
So we were talking about the director Roman Polanski, and really, you know, he's got a really good eye for filmmaking in general, the cinematography. There's this scene in this movie, Deb, where a pregnant Rosemary, Mia Farrow, walks into traffic. I believe it was in Times Square.
Mhm.
And that scene, apparently, from what I've learned, was completely spontaneous. Mia Farrow had to be convinced that it was all right to walk into real traffic. Roman Polanski, the director, reassured her that, you know, no one's going to hit a pregnant woman.
It's New York. They would hit her.
Well, you know, of course, we know she was not hit. The scene was very successfully shot. It was actually shot by Polanski himself using a handheld because no one else in the crew wanted to do it because it was such a dangerous little stunt that they were able to pull there. So that just kind of shows you, you know, the different genius techniques that this director employed and to great effect.
Yeah.
And so this movie, you know, has Mia Farrow's character Rosemary as a newlywed. And of course, in real life, Mia Farrow was also a newlywed, newly married to Frank Sinatra at the time. She was 21, Frank was about 50 or so. And so this was the movie that she was notoriously served divorce papers by Frank Sinatra's lawyer, I guess, in front of cast and crew. That's what happened. And I think a lot of people just kind of remember as this is Mia Farrow's movie in which that happened because apparently Sinatra did not like the idea of her pursuing her movie career. You know, as soon as they got married, wanted her to be the wife and stay home with him, that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, but she decided she was going to do it, and she did.
And I don't think that's the last she saw of Frank Sinatra. Rumors abound about the paternity of her now famous author son, Ronan Farrow.
Seriously, I don't know, you know, despite what Rowan is saying, one look at Ronan.
I know. Yeah.
Sorry.
But that's their business. This movie is great.
That is their business. That is
This baby in the movie does not resemble Frank Sinatra.
no. No. Anywho, we're gonna move on to our next movie. I would say, Deb, this movie is the one that really still gives me the chills. If I just hear the name William Peter Blatty, I start shaking. I mean, it is just the scariest movie I think I've ever seen. William Peter Blatty, of course, wrote the novel in which this movie was based on, of the same name, also was hired to do the screenplay. We are talking, of course, about 1973's The Exorcist.
Yeah, and this is another one that's on everybody's list. It's this may be an unpopular opinion. I'm not sure it stands the test of time as well as some of the films. The effects are so instrumental in manipulating the viewer. And they've been spoofed a million times, and they're old-fashioned. Nevertheless, the premise is of demonic possession is great. It's a staple in horror. This is the bar, by which all other movies of its kind are judged. All my friends, anybody who went to Washington, D.C. at any time had to go find those stairs. Everyone said the Exorcist stairs. I'll meet you at the Exorcist stairs. She lives right down the block from the Exorcist stairs. It's a real landmark in Washington. So Ellen Burstyn plays the mother. Linda Blair famously plays the possessed child. Max von Sydow, the priest. It really could almost be a play.
Yes.
The novel, the film. So much of it takes place in that house in Georgetown.
So from what I understand, this story, and you may also have heard this, I mean, it's been around for a long time, that it was based on a boy instead of a girl, who was Linda Blair in the movie, based on a 12 or 13-year-old boy from Maryland who came to St. Louis for the alleged exorcism. And the priest who was involved in it was a Jesuit priest, Father William Bodern, who taught at St. Louis University and also at St. Louis University High School. And so, just the fact that this had some basis in real life events, really for me is enough to qualify as a very, very, very scary movie. Yeah. So Deb, you were talking about the effects, and of course those types of effects have been surpassed later on. We've got bigger and better effects, but in its time, The Exorcist was the highest grossing R-rated horror film until 2017, when another film on our list surpassed that. There were I don't know, this is the first time I've heard of this, but when The Exorcist was out in theaters, there were actually long lines around the theaters in the cold, people who were returning to see it again and again. And there were even, incidents of vomiting and fainting and heart attacks and a couple of miscarriages.
The studios love to play up stuff like that with scary movies. The PR, they've got, I can remember still when I think like Blair Witch Project came out. That kind of PR, Paranormal Activity, Amityville, all that stuff. They say, we've had to drag. Be careful if you have a heart condition. Don't come see this movie. I'm not sure how much of it is actually true, but.
I don't know, but back in the day, there was a psychiatric journal that came up with a condition that some of these moviegoers were experiencing, a psychiatric publication called Such Reactions Triggered by the Film and Films Like It, Cinematic Neurosis. So FYI, if you're suffering a case of cinematic neurosis, that is what it is.
I think I sort of perpetually have like a chronic case of that. Ongoing.
Yes. So The Exorcist, you know what? I don't even have to set foot in the theater and watch this movie. Just seeing that movie poster is probably the scariest movie poster
Great
that I
poster.
could think of. So iconic. It's that scene when Father Merrin arrives at the house and he's looking up at the house and you
Out the
see,
window.
yes, silhouette in this misty fog, ensconced in fog, and the glow of the street light, just very iconic and very scary, just the
Yeah.
image that represents.
Yeah.
So our next film is from 1976, and it starred Gregory Peck and Lee Remick, and it was a film that made among the top in terms of box office dollars for that year, and we are talking about The Omen.
Yeah, The Omen, the original Omen. It was remade with Liev Schreiber, maybe in the early 2000s, but
2000s, yeah.
This is the good one.
Yes.
Now, the other thing I was going to bring up about these horror movies is one thing that makes them so great is that there is no formula. All bets are off. You never know what to expect, and it's part of the reason that keeps the genre fresh in your mind.
Yes.
You go to a romantic comedy, you know what's going to happen. Boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy gets girl back. It has variations on that theme, but that's the basic gist of it. Including gender variations, including
Yes.
age variations, including income variations, but you still know what's going to happen at the end of that movie.
Correct.
In horror, the good guy could win, the bad guy could win, nobody could win, and
I was going to say, you don't know who the heck won.
So The Omen stars Gregory Peck again. Come on, just Atticus Finch, and he's playing a U.S. diplomat whose wife gives birth and is told the child was stillborn. However, lucky them, a baby has been abandoned at the hospital.
Seriously appears at the hospital.
And we've got a baby for you. So Gregory Peck takes the baby.
Who does that, Deb? Who does that?
Well, and it's part of the reason this film works in 76, and
Right.
probably you'd have to tweak it a little for a modern audience. But it's easy to kind of go with it because it's, when you're watching it, it's dated. And gives the baby to the wife, and the wife never knows that it's not her biological child, but the father does. The wife's played by Lee Remick, again, fantastic.
Yeah.
So immediately this little baby, Rottweilers are appearing in the yard and people are falling downstairs, and the nanny hangs herself at the child's birthday party. And immediately the demonic nature of the child is exposed. So really it becomes a question of Gregory Peck sort of investigating what to do or find out the truth and then figuring out how to fix it, while this little child kind of comes of age. And he's not a demon. He's actually the devil. It's Satan is this baby. And that's not a spoiler alert. I think you figured that out pretty quickly.
Yes.
And so, he goes and he seeks out this old priest, and the priest is telling him how to handle it. Meanwhile, this child is getting older and, killing everything in its path. And
Sweet little Damien, yes.
Damien Thorne, I'm telling you. And so this movie, I don't think it's too much of a spoiler alert because it's a trilogy. There have been two subsequent installments of that film. So it's a good first film, and it stands alone in its own right. But it, you obviously have some suspicions when there's a sequel that there's something left unresolved.
Yes,
but
this was,
great acting, great sets, every scene. It's really fun to watch. It's scary, but it's also visually just wonderful.
So I understand, talk about a score here, getting Gregory Peck to star in this movie. And he apparently took a pay cut He was only paid $250,000 to star in the movie. He opted instead to get 10% of the film's box office growth. And this film, when it came out, made $61 million. And so just figure that out. 10% of that went to Mr. Gregory Peck. And just a side note about the child who played Damien, Harvey Stevens, you know, he was a blonde kid. They dyed his hair black to make him look even more menacing. But from what I'm told from, you know, from our research here, he was just a little shit on the set. He was a terror on the set. Some of the cast and crew describe him as just awful. So I don't know if they even needed that dye job. They probably should have just let him be.
You didn't have to do too much acting.
Exactly. Our next film will take us to 43 Lambkin Lane. And if that address sounds familiar to you, good for you.
Hattenberg.
Yes, we are talking about the 1978 film Halloween. Debbie, my gosh.
You know, there's a couple of sort of tried and true tropes for horror. And Michael Myers and the escaped mental patient, sort of unkillable villain, is iconic in this movie. Jamie Lee Curtis's debut role and how she was dubbed the Scream Queen.
Yes. She was only 19 when she starred in this movie. She had the role of Laurie, of course.
And yes, the main character, she is, you know, she kind of, she's almost sort of the Molly Ringwald of the 70s. You know how she's not model beautiful, but she's attractive.
Very attractive, yes.
And likable. Like just this quality about her that you can see why she caught the director's eye, you know, and it's just, she's perfect for the part, just the right amount of, you know, hysteria. And Donald Pleasance is her counterpart as the insane asylum psychiatrist who is in charge of Michael Myers' care, who has never wavered in his belief that Michael Myers is untreatable, uncurable, that he is inhuman in a sense. And Michael Myers escapes one rainy night and returns to his hometown of Hattenberg. I think it's Ohio, right?
Gosh, I don't know.
Illinois, maybe. I think it's Illinois. Anyway.
Yes, it's Illinois. You're right. It is Illinois, not Ohio.
And wreaks havoc on Halloween night. And it's just a classic 70s horror. And it still is scary to this day. Everything about it is scary. The babysitter watching the kids, inviting the boyfriend over. You know, it ticks every box.
It's definitely a benchmark. It's often been imitated. I don't think anything comes close to it. Of course, you know, when you come up with such an original idea like this back in the day, you know, the working title for this film, Deb, was The Babysitter Murders because of what happens in the film. And the story was supposed to take place over several days. But this movie was probably one of the cheapest movies ever produced.
Yep.
It only had a budget of $300,000. And so to save money, what they actually did was to revise that script for the story in the movie to take place in the span of one day. And so think about what you would save there. You'd save on location, you'd save on costume changes.
Right.
In fact, Jamie Lee Curtis, all the actors had to wear their own clothes because they had no money for wardrobe. And she went to JCPenney, got her outfit for less than $100. And, you know.
Less than 100? She probably got it for less than 40.
Probably. And so, even that really, really distinct Halloween score, the music, that was done on the cheap. That was actually done by director John Carpenter, who also does some movie scores. But he didn't have, money for a composer, let alone hiring musicians, or an orchestra. And so what he did was he rented a synthesizer studio in LA and got to work and came up with, my God, probably one of the classic movie scores of all time.
And honestly, he could have stopped after the first four notes. That's all, you hear that, and Halloween, you're a little scared. It's sort of like hearing the Jaws.
Yes.
Jaws. But
so, you never know. That was the probably greatest success story of doing a film score on the cheap. And also,
struggling actor who's out there, shooting a film for like an NYU student and getting paid, $80. Who knows what could happen?
Exactly. And then the other thing that stood out to me was, the special effects. One of the ways that they did so, throughout the movie, you've got the knife and the stabbing, and that was done stabbing a knife into a watermelon, and that is the sound effect that you hear all throughout the movies. So the Myers home, where the movie, apparently the story has its origins, was a house in South Pasadena in California, and it is now a chiropractor's office. And so it's still standing, it's still there.
That's wild.
Yes. And so this next movie on our list came about due to the success of Halloween. So from Lambkin Lane, we are headed to Camp Crystal Lake, and we are talking, of course, about Friday the 13th.
Yes, and Friday the 13th is the same deal. It's the director, and you probably know this story, put an ad in Variety magazine to try and sell the film.
Yes.
On the heels of the success of Halloween. A similar budget, I think the budget for Friday the 13th was about $500,000, give or take.
Not much, yes.
Same deal, a bunch of unknown actors, including our favorite, young Kevin Bacon.
Yes, Kevin Bacon.
And about the rumor of a child, Jason Voorhees, who drowned at the camp, but his ghost has returned to seek its vengeance on returning campers and counselors. It fits that old, every stereotype that is spoofed and made fun of in Scream, and I know, and Scary Movie takes place in this film. The promiscuous girl gets killed first. Of
course, yes, yeah. Always a promiscuous girl.
But again, a summer camp, Murders in the Woods is the perfect hot button to scare the heck out of you as an audience member. And this one's also still scary today.
Yeah, and so, we were just talking about Halloween, and compared to Halloween, in terms of the score, we talked about John Carpenter's Halloween score. Halloween had a lot of music throughout the movie, and that's why that score is kind of ingrained in your mind. The filmmakers for Friday the 13th went the opposite way, and they intentionally minimized the use of music. In fact, they only chose to play the music when the killer was around. Killer is present in the scene. And so you'll see those two distinct differences between the two. And also, apparently, which this never really, came to mind when I saw the two films, Halloween was inspired by Psycho in a way that, you only have a minimal amount of gore and blood, where it's really mainly left up to your imagination.
Well, their effort to save money paid off, because it's so much worse in your head,
Exactly. That's what I'm thinking. So Friday the 13th, again, went kind of the other way and really piled on the graphic violence in terms of, this is probably one of the first movies where the violence is so in your face. Yeah.
And it's, you know, it's a different kind of horror movie. In my opinion, Halloween is a superior film. I think it's more
I
effective
agree.
to do it the way Carpenter did it. But Friday the 13th is, you know, has merit in that style. It's just a different kind of scary.
I agree. I agree. And I think, you know, during its time, it was really the shock factor because you've never really seen anything like it.
Yeah.
Now, you know, again, that's often imitated. So we're going to go to the year 2002, and we are going to talk about a movie that was actually a remake of a Japanese film, a Japanese horror film called Ring or Ringu. And we are talking about The Ring.
This movie really freaked me out. It is, okay, so The Ring, the premise of the film is there's a videotape, a mysterious videotape that's sort of circulating, and if you watch the videotape, you die 7 days later. Very simple premise. All the teenagers are like, oh, let's watch it, it's not gonna happen, and this group of teens watches it in this old, they're at like this lodge, this like lodge in the woods, and they watch the tape, the phone rings, the voice on the phone says 7 days and disconnects, and all those kids die. And one of those kids, one of them who doesn't watch the tape, I think like her boyfriend calls her something, she doesn't watch, but she has a complete mental breakdown. And Naomi Watts plays the sister of the mother of one of the kids who died and is a journalist. And she comes in to investigate this mysterious videotape, which of course she watches. So now the clock is ticking on the movie because you know what happened to the teenagers, you know there's some force of evil at work here, and she's watched the tape and she's got 7 days to solve it. I mean, it's a great premise. It puts you on edge immediately because you're like, oh my God, don't watch this, you know, don't watch it.
Exactly.
Like, you know, these movies, it really do make you want to yell at the screen. And then to add to that anxiety, Naomi Watts' character has a young son who also watches the video when she's
Of course
not.
he does.
So now she's not only got to figure out what's going on, she's got to save the kid, she's got the boyfriend also watches the tape, which features this bizarre montage of disturbing images, including this wet, dark-haired young girl. Just the visual of that child. I mean, everyone's seen it, even if you haven't seen the movie, Samara, is enough to kind of, you know, send you like hiding under the covers.
Yes, very nightmarish. And I understand as part of the marketing for this film, you know, when it first came out, some moviegoers actually saw a videotape as they sat in the theater on their seat.
Oh, yeah.
And not knowing what the film was all about, yeah, you kind of just scary, creepy. So that's The Ring for you.
And I don't know if this was certainly the first prominent Japanese horror remake in the US.
Yeah, this spawned a lot of other.
I'm sure there have been others, but what this triggered was a spate of fantastic Japanese horror remakes in the US. So you get like this very interesting sort of decade of maybe 3 or 4 really good horror films that originally were Japanese films.
So we are going to jump to the year 2008. Deb, I had not heard of this movie, but the premise is very scary to me because it's one of those happenings that you wouldn't be surprised if you saw it as a news story that happened to people. And that is the film, The Strangers.
And this is one, you know, as you said, the thing that really scares you are the movies that where it could really happen. And this is the quintessential horror film in that respect. There's nothing supernatural. There's nothing, how they do that, where that, you know, how they get from there to there. It's all very realistic. It takes place in a very short time frame. I think it's just one night. And the film starts off with the 2 main characters, played by Liv Tyler and Scott Speedman, going to his cabin for to finish out a weekend after a wedding.
Mm-hmm.
They are at odds, this couple, because he has proposed and she's rejected the proposal. So you already have tension between this couple. The strangers are 3 human people in the creepiest freaking masks you've ever seen, because you get a choice. Take your pick. Do you want the sort of elephant man stitched together mask? Is that what scares you? Got one of those. Is there the little doll with the knife that, like it has you staring at the doll on your shelf in your kid's bedroom? Got one of those. So there's 3 strangers that show up with no other intention but to menace and murder these people. And this movie's terrifying. I don't know what else to add to that. It's just the end of the movie is positively bone-chilling, and the acting is very strong, a good cast, and it's not just a lot of times you see a movie like that and you think it's a 20-minute premise they've stretched out to 90 minutes.
Sure.
This film has a little more substance to it than that. So, but yeah, if you're looking for a good scare that's going to make you checking your doors,
your bushes, your garage,
alarms on, The Strangers.
Lock your doors, everybody.
Yeah.
So, Deb, I understand that this story was inspired partly by the Manson family murders, which of course we know happened, and also something the director Brian Bertino experienced as a young boy. Apparently, somebody knocked on his door and asked if somebody who was not at their home was home. And so after he says no, the stranger leaves, and then later on he finds out that a few homes in his neighborhood were broken into that night, the night that the stranger visited. So kind of gives you that feeling of dread and something not good. So another way of feeling dread and something not good, I think, is this next film. Although it really scares me, the premise of it, the fact that this was actually a true story, Debbie, and I just really like the premise. I think this is going to be, for me, going to be another one of those really scary movies that won't put me to bed, and that is The Conjuring from 2013.
This film stars Vera Farmiga and Patrick Wilson as sort of paranormal investigators, and they get a call to investigate this house where a young couple played by Ron Livingston and Lily Taylor, who is sort of the horror movie staple. She's been in a handful of them, and she has a very sort of worldly quality about her, which serves the genre well. They and I think they've got 4 or 5 children, move into this farmhouse. And I mean, it really takes it up from like the Amityville Horror, or I'm trying to think of other films that are kind of in that similar vein. This one is next level, in my opinion. It's scarier. You're terrified always for these children. They're always there's 4 or 5 kids, and they're always getting into something, these girls, and they're always running. They find the boarded up basement, and they are down in places they shouldn't be, and you just want to hide your eyes. There is a demon in the house. She is a woman who was, I think, burned as a witch in maybe the 19th century. And she is cursed the house and all who try and take her land. And the Vera Farmiga and
Patrick
Wilson character are called in to try and sort of exorcise this demon from the house. But
they actually play a real life couple. They're ghost hunters.
Yes.
They are Ed and Lorraine Warren. They're real life couple who was called in to look into the goings on at this house.
Yes. And they, it's just a really well done movie. There's almost no respite. You know what I mean? It's
right.
You kind of like, you get that little break where you kind of go, okay, this isn't a scary, and then it pulls you right back in.
I saw the trailer and it's just bone chilling.
Yeah.
And, you know, Deb, I mean, you are right, because to give you guys an idea of just how scary this film is, it received an R rating. This film was R rated despite having no sex or no nudity,
Yeah.
relatively tame,
Right.
mild profanity, and no blood really. It got the R rating based on just sheer scare factor. That's what
Yeah.
I understand. So it really is intriguing to me, but I don't know if I can stand it.
I know it's stressful. I mean,
Yeah.
thank God we're streaming all these movies. You know, when you're sort of trapped in the theater, there is a certain comfort to having an audience around you, but there's also a certain comfort to the pause button. You know,
Yeah,
you can watch
I
an
agree.
episode of The Office.
You
and
can
then come back.
decide whether you've had enough.
Yeah.
So we talked about, you know, Ed and Lorraine Warren, the ghost hunters. Also, the family that lived in that house, the Perron family, you know, they actively talked about this film and actively promoted the film during its release. In fact, the real Lorraine Warren, Vera Farmiga's character, and Andrea Perron, who was one of the daughters, served as consultants for the film to just give it, you know, a little bit more, in case it wasn't real enough. They were there to make sure it definitely was. So yeah, it's on my list. I don't know when I'll see it, but it's on my list. All right, so our next film, this is the film we're talking about that really toppled the Exorcist box office record when it comes to a horror movie, and it came out in 2017, and it was the highest grossing film of 2017. It was so popular that year that, you know, and beyond that, the main character was also 2017's most popular Halloween costume.
No question. It might still be one of the most popular ones.
There you go. And we are talking about the movie It.
You know, Stephen King. I could have done just a Stephen King list.
We should do a Stephen King list.
I mean, honestly, it's this one. I think part of the reason that it's on here, first of all, clowns. I can't.
Yeah. No.
I mean, there was an Anthony Hopkins movie, and I actually should have put that one on the list too. See what I mean about there being too many choices?
I know.
Called, I think it's just called Magic. And he's a ventriloquist, and there's this ventriloquist dummy in the movie that's, you know, alive.
Oh,
The clown is another one. These are the things that really, and I know they push
clowns, mimes, ventriloquist dummies. Yes.
Yeah. So, you know, Fizbo aside, Cam from Modern Family, I can't really think of a clown that I enjoy.
No.
So this clown, Pennywise, is a demonic child-eating character who lives in a storm drain and eats children.
Yeah.
That's the recap. Stephen King is the master of these give a kid a nightmare concepts. Stand by Me. It's the Tommyknockers. This one is this group of kids who are sort of outcasts and they're bullied, and one of them had a little brother who went missing maybe the year before. Right. And they form this sort of impromptu gang, not bad gang, just a band of friends that are both looking for this missing brother and, you know, taking on this demonic clown. That's all you need to know.
That's pretty much
scary as hell and really scary for kids.
Oh, for big kids too. You know, when we saw this movie in the theater, I was the one that was kind of in the middle, my husband and two of our friends, and they took me for the sheer entertainment of watching Trish get scared. So yeah, I had to really be convinced to see this movie, not just because of the horror factor, but also the clown thing. Yeah. I think I have that, you know, that clown disease that You're scared
Yeah,
of
yeah.
clowns. Yes. So, but anyway, Bill Skarsgård was the actor who played Pennywise in this movie. He himself called the clown animalistic and instinctive, and performed his role by drawing on inspiration from some of film's top villains: Hannibal Lecter, the Joker in The Dark Knight, Jack Torrance in The Shining. And if these sound familiar to you, it's because Debbie had these guys in last week's list of top movie villains. So he was definitely, Bill Skarsgård was really onto something here.
Yeah, and you can see elements of those characters in Pennywise. It's
Yes.
it's good performance. I mean, as much as I am repelled by the idea of the demonic clown, um, he does a great job.
Yes.
Very spooky. And as you said, this movie did an incredible job at the box office. It made a ton of money because people who are not necessarily horror movies, they somehow managed to mainstream this movie with the promotion and the marketing. And I mean, my kids who aren't really horror film people all went and saw it in the theater. So, I mean, they did something right with this as far as box office goes.
You're right about that. It definitely had a more generic appeal. And I
Yeah.
don't know why that is. Do you think other people
scary.
other than us, everyone else loves clowns but us? I don't know.
No, I don't think so. That's not it.
All right. We're going to go the following year to this next movie. And it is a movie, probably the movie I'm most unfamiliar with on this list. But if it's on Debbie's list, I trust it's scary. And we are talking about the film Suspiria.
Suspiria is a film that I don't think many people have heard of. It's actually, this version, this 2018 version, is actually a remake of the 1977 version. This film stars Tilda Swinton as the headmistress of a German dance company in Berlin. Dakota Johnson of 50 Shades of Grey fame plays a young dancer from Ohio who is escaping her, I think she's a Mennonite or she's Amish. She comes from this very conservative religious background in Ohio and leaves her sect, her community, to go to Berlin and audition for this dance troupe. She has no training, no experience, no formal training, I should say. And she dances and is so stunning in her performance that the Tilda Swinton character, who would never sit in on an audition at this level, is drawn into the room by her. You know, there's a lot of otherworldliness and sort of psychic energy that goes on in this film. Now, this film is complicated. It takes place, it starts out in 1977. It covers a large amount of time. It's part Black Swan, part Exorcist. I don't know if that's even the right, Exorcist isn't even the right comparison, but it's like the Black Swan meets the supernatural is maybe more close to it. But as Dakota Johnson you already know, like right off the bat, that something very strange is going on at this dance company. A woman in the company the movie starts off, she's banging on her psychiatrist's door. She's absolutely not in her right mind. She's muttering. She is speaking in multiple languages. She's turning anything that has eyes, any book or photograph in the room. She's turning them away from her. I mean, and she's complaining about this headmistress, this Mother Marcos at this dance troupe. You got to pay attention. You've got to watch it. The payoff of this film is so fantastic. It's super scary in the best way, in the way I love a scary movie. There's incredibly beautiful dancing. Dakota Johnson, I will tell you, she gets a rough deal because of 50 Shades of Grey, but I'm telling you, she was the best thing about that movie trilogy. And despite the fact that Jamie Dornan kind of phoned in that performance, She, to me, was a standout in that film. And, you know, maybe the only standout. But she's a talented actress, much like her mother, Melanie Griffith. And she does a fantastic job in this very, very challenging role. And Tilda Swinton, my God, she should have been on our villains list. She is just...
There is something about her that, you know,
Right.
conjures up some fear.
And this movie, again, is it's a character that kind of turns that concept on its ear and will surprise you again. It's gruesome. There are parts of it that are incredibly violent and hard to watch. Most of it's psychological. It's just a really cool, weird film. And you read the reviews and they're highly mixed. Reviewers will say you will either walk out of this film after 30 minutes and just say to hell with it, I can't even follow this thing, or you will get so sucked in to what's going on that the film is long. It's 2.5 hours long.
Okay.
So if you really want to settle in for a night of weird, Suspiria is your movie.
There you go. A night of weird awaits you with Suspiria.
A night of scary weird, or weird scary.
All right. So we've come to the end of our list with another film from the year 2018. And this one, the premise is very, very fascinating to me. It's probably, you know, along with The Conjuring, Suspiria, this film I'd probably add to the top of my must-see list, especially getting ready for Halloween here. And that is the film Unsane, and it is directed by Steven Soderbergh.
Now, this film, I put it on the list for a couple of reasons. It is not the scariest movie in the world. It has a very low body count, I will say. It really sort of walks the line between horror and thriller. It's more of a thriller. I left it on the list for a couple of reasons, though. First of all, it's a fantastic newer movie that most people have never heard of.
Yes.
Second of all, it's Steven Soderbergh, who, from Sex, Lies, and Videotape to Contagion, never disappoints. He is such a smart, effective director that I really love all of his movies. The third reason is this film puts a very modern take on the very standard horror movie trope of can't escape the mental hospital, which is another fantastic and terrifying premise. Sane person in the insane asylum. This one stars Claire Foy, who, if you're not familiar with her, is an actress you should get to know. She is incredibly talented. She's beautiful to watch on camera, just a very gifted actor.
She starred in The Crown, correct? As
yes,
Queen Elizabeth.
Elizabeth in The Crown, but this is obviously it's a more modern
departure.
She plays a woman who has moved to Pennsylvania from Boston to get away from a man who is stalking her, who has stalked her for 2 years. And she starts a new job at a bank, and she's kind of a bitch, this character. Her name is Sawyer Valenti. What a great character name. And she is a loan officer at a bank, and she is getting hit on by her boss, and wherever, she's extremely attractive, and she gets catcalls, and she endures it as just part of the life of an attractive woman living in a big city. Soderbergh, again, with this brilliant little kind of added element of the vulnerability of women in society. It's not proselytizing. He's not shoving it down your throat. It's just there. It's a very smart filmmaking. She thinks she sees the stalker. This stalker, by the way, that she has told no one about. Her mother doesn't even know. No one knows that she's moved or that this man was even bothering her in her old city. She thinks she sees this man again, and she decides to seek out a therapist. Thus begins our story. And this all happens. The other thing I love about Soderbergh, this all happens in the first maybe 5 minutes of the movie.
Oh,
There's
wow.
not this big, long, because you know what's going to happen. You know she gets trapped in this mental hospital and she can't get out. So let's get her in the mental hospital. So she goes and she sees the therapist. She loves the therapist. She's like, I'd like to book another appointment with you. You're such a good listener. She tells the therapist a lot of stuff. I mean, it's a therapy session. She confesses suicidal thoughts, how horrible it's been having this man stalk her. And the therapist is absolutely, fill out these forms. She fills out the forms. She doesn't read the forms. Read the forms.
Yes,
Yes, you're in a mental hospital. And what she has inadvertently done is admitted herself, voluntarily admitted herself for 24-hour observation. Thus begins the journey of this insurance scam hospital who keeps patients for basically 7 days. As long as their insurance is willing to pay for it, they involuntarily incarcerate these people. And so she has to basically get through this week at this mental hospital. When, lo and behold, who should show up as the newest employee at the mental hospital?
No.
The stalker.
Wow.
So her friend at the mental hospital is played by SNL veteran Jay Farrow. He is fantastic.
Which was delightful to find out.
And I really want to see him in more dramatic roles. He was extremely good in this role, talented, fun, great to watch. The stalker is played by an actor named Joshua Leonard, who has this eerie resemblance to kind of a bearded Robin Williams, but 20 times creepier. And Robin Williams had played some creepy roles in his career.
Mm-hmm.
This guy is so superbly cast. He's absolutely perfect. And it's just, as you can imagine, a terrifying week in a mental hospital where there's a power shift, where there is access to medications, where there is, any straying outside the lines of what is considered normalcy is regarded as unstable or mentally ill. So it's, again, a very interesting examination of that whole concept of what is mentally healthy. How do you express duress when no one believes you? It's just a lot of very cool things he pokes at on top of being a very white knuckle, 90 minutes of film watching.
Oh my gosh. I mean, just horrifying concept, but it definitely has my interest there. Deb, I did not know this, just found out. Steven Soderbergh shot this film on the iPhone 7 Plus.
Oh, I did not know that.
Entire film. It has the distinction of being shot entirely on the iPhone 7 Plus. The film was shot in just 10 days, so maybe that gives you, some ideas there that just that little handheld thing will shorten your production time. I know, isn't that weird? So
very. That's
that
cool.
tells you what a creative genius Soderbergh is.
I was gonna say, you say like, oh, Steven Spielberg shot something with an 8mm camera, an iPhone. These guys could probably doodle it on paper and it would still be great.
Yeah, I'm thinking like that's really the mark of a true genius filmmaker, when you can do with pretty much anything and come up with a movie like this. So definitely.
And I'm watching it. I'm like this with my ears plugged, because for me, for some reason, it's the sound that's really terrifying. Like if you listen to these movies, if you watch these movies on mute, they're much less scary.
Well, yeah, the sound, and also for some of these movies, it's the score that makes you terrified. So, all right, guys, that is our list. So the next time you go in the shower or go camping or stay at that rustic Airbnb farmhouse in Rhode Island,
or wipe the steam off a mirror.
Yeah, exactly. That's such a classic scare tactic. but it always works for me. I don't know about you. You know what to expect, but it still scares you when whatever comes up.
Every time.
Every time.
And it can be like, first they do it and there's no one there, but then they open the medicine cabinet and then you see, you know what I mean? There's 100 different ways to do it and they're all scary.
They're all scary. They're all scary. So, as I said, I'm a wimp when it comes to horror films, and I really would suggest seeing some of these in broad daylight.
Listen, this is what the list should have been. Horror movies from two wimps who are terrified of everything.
You are much more courageous than I am, because I know you have told me that, you know, pretty much almost all of these movies you've seen by yourself. So, yeah. My God. All right. So, you know, see it in broad daylight. I'll give you a treat to go along with it.
I was going to say, I need some snacks for this. So what have you got for me?
Well, like if you were doing the work, you know, prep for this show early in the morning like I was today, I have for you cinnamon rolls with puff pastry. It is the easiest thing to make, Deb. I was so impressed by this. You just get the packaged puff pastry from
I have some in my freezer.
Oh my gosh. Well, this is your recipe. Cinnamon, sugar, and butter. That is all you need. And you have these great cinnamon rolls, and they're kind of little, you know, they're kind of like a 2-bite size.
Almost sounds like a churro.
Yes, because that's kind of what the puff pastry has, the texture.
That sounds amazing.
Yes, and it's so easy. And it's, you know, great for this weather. Cinnamon reminds me of fall, and your house will smell so good, because I'm never really a fan of those cinnamon candles or whatever.
Yeah.
The real thing is much better, and you've got cinnamon and butter going on here.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Yes, it is unbelievable. So we will have that recipe for you on gazellemagazine.com. So this is all our time for today. We cannot wait to see you next time. Thanks for watching. Thank you to Debbie Baldwin for making this fantastic list. And again, if you know you have any complaints about how scared you got, send your letters and complaints to Debbie Baldwin, not to me. All right, Debbie, I will see you next time.
Thanks, Trish.
Bye.
Bye.